All right, so today we're diving into some pretty spicy territory, the world of international politics and economics. Specifically, what one very prominent voice, former President Trump, has to say about the state of things, global affairs and all that.
Yeah, always interesting to hear what he has to say.
Always, right. And, he's been making some pretty let's say, bold claims about how he'd handle Russia and these BRICS nations,
hmm
tariffs, ultimatums, deals.
Sounds familiar, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely his style. But the big question we're tackling in this deep dive is, are these ideas, just bluster, or could they actually work?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And I think a good place to start is with his claims about Ukraine.
Okay, yeah.
You might remember him saying he could have, secured a peace deal there within 24 hours.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Didn't quite pan out that way,
Yep,
obviously.
not quite.
But it's interesting, right? Because now he's shifted gears and is talking about these tariffs, as leverage. Like he's giving Russia an ultimatum.
Huh.
Actually, let's just hear him in his own words. It's pretty wild.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, yeah, he's really pushing for these tariffs instead of sanctions.
Yeah, he does seem to prefer tariffs, doesn't he?
He does. Why do you think he sees those as a better tool? Like, what's the thinking there?
Well, I mean, I think he might see them as, more direct, like a faster way to put the squeeze on economically.
Okay, so like a more immediate kind of pressure.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like, imagine, every time a product from Russia, comes into the U.S., it has to pay this fee, right?
Like a toll booth.
Yeah, exactly, like a toll booth.
Yeah.
And that makes it more expensive for us, for American consumers.
Gotcha. And then I guess the hope is that we'd buy less of that stuff. Prices are higher,
Right.
hurts their economy, and then Putin's like, okay, fine, let's make a deal.
Yeah, that's the general idea.
Mm.
But, it all hinges on whether Russia actually cares about selling stuff to the U.S. Like, do they need our market that badly?
That's a good point.
Their main thing is oil, right?
Right.
And we can get that from plenty of other places.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. And it kind of makes you wonder about how this whole tariff thing would work with the BRICS nations too.
Yeah.
He's even said he'd slap a 100% tariff on all of them,
Wow. Okay.
basically saying, don't even bother trading with us.
Which, that could have huge consequences, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the BRICS, they're not small potatoes.
No, they're not.
They're a big chunk of the world's population, the global economy.
Yeah.
Trying to shut them out, I
Yeah.
mean, it could really backfire.
Yeah, big time. And it seems like, with the BRICS especially, Trump's viewing it all very transactionally.
Like he does with most things, yeah.
Like he does with everything. Remember when he said Spain was part of BRICS?
Oh, yeah, that was something.
It was. And, it kind of makes you think, like, does he really grasp all the nuances of, global geopolitics?
Right, right.
It's a little unnerving.
A little, yeah,
Especially when you're talking about policies with, potentially huge consequences.
exactly. And speaking of consequences, let's go back to tariffs for a sec. We talked about how they work, but who ends up actually paying for them?
Yeah, good question. Is it the countries exporting the stuff, or is it us folks back home?
So that's where it gets kind of tricky, because often it ends up being us, the American consumers, who foot the bill.
Really?
Yeah, the importers, they pay the tariff up front,
Ugh.
right? But then they just pass that cost along to us through higher prices.
Oh, I see.
So, it's possible that this whole tariff strategy could actually end up hurting the people he claims to be protecting.
That's ironic, right? And you know how Trump's always going on about China manipulating its currency?
Oh, yeah.
Well, wouldn't these tariffs potentially make that problem even worse?
Oh, absolutely. You put tariffs on Chinese goods,
Mm.
that could drive down the value of their currency, the yuan.
Okay.
And then even with the tariffs, their stuff becomes cheaper on the global market.
So it's like the opposite of what he wants to happen.
Exactly. It could actually boost Chinese exports.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like there's a lot more to this whole thing than just, slapping tariffs on everything.
For sure.
I mean, Trump's confidence in his deal making, it's undeniable.
Oh, yeah, he definitely believes in it.
But is that really enough to, to handle all the complexities of international relations? Can he really strong arm other countries just with threats and bluster?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because international relations, they're not like a business deal. You can't just bully countries into doing what you want.
Right, right. And there's the whole human element too. Like, Trump's talked about how he likes the Russian people, even said he wants to do them a favor by getting Putin to settle the war.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Let's listen to that clip, actually.
Okay.
It's a little contradictory, don't you think?
Definitely a bit of a mixed message, yeah.
He's all warm and fuzzy about the Russian people, but then he's advocating for these aggressive economic tactics that could, actually hurt them.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about his true intentions.
Yeah, for sure. Like, is it genuine affection or just a tactic? Or maybe it's a bit of both.
Right. It's hard to know what's going on in his head.
It really is. So we've talked about tariffs, about Trump's deal-making,
Mm.
but what about the people around him, advising him?
Oh, yeah, that's important too.
Because even with all his talk, he's surrounded by some pretty hawkish folks.
That's true.
Like Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State,
Right.
and Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor. They're not exactly known for being soft on Russia.
No, not really. And that could be a limiting factor, Even if Trump himself wanted to go a different route, he might be pushed in a more aggressive direction by the people around him.
Yeah, you're probably right. Seems like there's a lot of competing forces at play here, both within the administration
Right.
and out there on the world stage.
It's a complicated picture, that's for sure. And if we want to make sense of Trump's strategy, what it means for global trade, for international relations, well, we need to understand all these forces at play.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, so we've been really digging into Trump's, his whole vision for global trade, all this talk about tariffs, ultimatums.
Right.
But what if it all backfires? What happens then? What could be the fallout, like on the world stage?
Yeah, that's a big concern. I mean, one thing you got to remember is that pushing countries like Russia and China, it could really escalate tensions.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Because we're not talking about like these simple entities. They're
Yeah.
complex, right? They have their own politics going on internally, their vulnerabilities, their goals.
So it's not as simple as, just telling them what to do and expecting them to fall in line?
No, definitely not. It's more like if you push them into a corner with all these threats and tariffs, they might just become more resistant, less likely to cooperate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then you get, retaliatory measures, trade wars, maybe even a complete breakdown of communication.
That's not good.
And you can't forget about, miscalculations, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
In a world with nuclear weapons, even a small mistake could be catastrophic.
That's a scary thought. Trump seems so confident in his deal-making, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like he really thinks he can be this master negotiator on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
But how realistic is that, really? Can he just, bully other countries into doing what he wants just with threats and bluster?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that international relations, they're not the same as business negotiations.
Okay.
Countries, they're not corporations. They have their own interests, their own history, their own relationships with other countries.
So it's not like, just sweetening the deal with some tax breaks or offering a lower price on a building?
No, not quite. International agreements, they often involve, complex balances of power, compromise on some very sensitive issues.
Right.
And you need a deep understanding of, all the cultural nuances, the history.
It's a lot more complicated than it seems, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot more. It's not just about getting the best price. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
And sometimes I guess the other side just doesn't want to make a deal, especially if they feel like they're being, pressured or threatened.
Exactly. Countries, just like people, they don't respond well to ultimatums.
Yeah, no one likes to be bullied.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can really, it can create resentment, mistrust, makes cooperation that much harder.
So where does that leave us? I mean, are we heading towards a world where everyone's just looking out for themselves? More protectionism, less cooperation.
Yeah. That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. We're living in a time of a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
You've got the rise of new economic powers, technology's changing everything, climate change, all these geopolitical shifts. It's like we're at a crossroads.
A crossroads.
Yeah, and all these different paths leading into the unknown.
So the choices we make now, they'll have a huge impact on the future.
Absolutely. If we give in to these protectionist impulses, if we just retreat into our own little corners of the world,
Okay.
then we risk economic stagnation, conflict, missed opportunities. But if we embrace cooperation, if we're willing to work together,
fine. Yeah.
if we're open to innovation, if we all take responsibility,
Yeah.
then we have the potential to create a much better future, more prosperous future, a more peaceful future, a more sustainable future.
That's definitely a vision I can get behind. But it sounds like it all comes down to, how we handle these complex issues, whether we can find common ground even when we disagree.
It does. And that means we need strong leadership,
Mm.
but we need informed citizens, citizens who understand what's at stake, who demand solutions that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
So it's not just about what happens in Washington or in the UN.
No, it's about what we all do, every one of us, to shape the world we want to live in.
Yeah, I like that.
The future it's not some predetermined thing. It's something we create
Yeah.
through our choices, our actions, our engagement.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive on, Trump's vision for
Yeah.
global trade. We've spent a lot of time talking about his approach, all the tariffs, the ultimatums.
Right.
But let's switch gears a bit now. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Trump's approach isn't the way to go. What other options are out there? How can we build, a more stable global trade system,
Yeah.
one that benefits, everyone, not just a select few?
Yeah, that's the key question, right? And the good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I mean, there were tons of folks, economists, diplomats, even some former presidents, who've been pushing for a more collaborative approach for decades.
So instead of, going it alone and trying to bully other countries into these deals,
Right.
what would this collaborative approach look like? What's the alternative?
Well, one big idea is, focusing on diplomacy, multilateralism, using these international institutions we have.
Okay.
Think, the UN, the World Trade Organization, regional trade blocs.
Right, right.
The idea is that by working together, countries can set clear rules, resolve disputes peacefully, and create a more level playing field.
So it's less about, America first and more about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Exactly. It's understanding that we live in an interconnected world,
Mm.
and these big challenges we face, like climate change, pandemics, economic crises,
Yeah.
they need collective action.
Yeah.
Going it alone, it's not just ineffective; it's actually dangerous.
That makes sense. But let's be honest, these international institutions, they're not perfect.
Oh no, definitely not.
They can be slow, bureaucratic, and sometimes they don't really address the needs of, developing countries.
You're right. Those are all valid criticisms. And it shows that we need, we need to
Yeah.
keep reforming them, keep adapting them, make sure they're really representative and effective.
Okay.
But even with their flaws, these institutions are still vital. They provide, a framework for dialogue, for cooperation, for resolving conflicts. They're not perfect, but they're the best tools we have for managing this complex, interconnected world.
All right, so let's imagine for a second that, global trade is actually a force for good.
Okay.
It helps people escape poverty, drives innovation, promotes peace. What would that look like? What principles would guide that kind of system?
That's a great question, and honestly, people have been debating it for a long time. But I think if you had to boil it down, I'd say fairness, sustainability, and transparency would be the core principles.
Okay, break that down for me. What do those principles look like in practice?
Sure. So, fairness means making sure that the benefits of global trade are shared equitably. It's not just a handful of rich countries or corporations getting all the gains.
Right.
It means creating a system where developing countries have a real chance to participate and benefit.
So it's about leveling the playing field a bit, making sure everyone, has a fair shot no matter where they're from or how much economic power they have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And sustainability, that means ensuring trade practices don't damage the environment or, hurt future generations.
Okay, yeah.
We need to, incorporate environmental and social factors into trade agreements. We need to encourage responsible business practices. We need to invest in green technologies.
So finding that balance between economic growth and protecting the planet.
Exactly. And then transparency. That means being open, accountable, making sure trade negotiations and agreements are accessible to the public.
So no more backroom deals.
Right. It means giving citizens the power to hold their governments and corporations accountable.
Okay. So all this, what does it mean for us, the listeners? What can we do to actually promote this more just, more sustainable trade system?
Well, first off, educate yourself. Learn about the complexities of trade, how it affects your life. Support organizations that promote fair trade, advocate for policies that prioritize sustainability and transparency,
Hmm.
and be a conscious consumer. Every time you buy something, you're kind of voting for the kind of world you want to live in.
Mm. Wow, yeah. That's a powerful thought. It shows how connected we all are
We are.
and how our choices, even small ones, can make a difference.
They do. The future of global trade, the future of the world, it's not set in stone. It's something we create together.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the nitty-gritty of tariffs to this vision of a more just and sustainable trade system.
Hmm.
So, if you had to give one piece of advice to the current administration on, how to navigate all this, what would it be?
I'd say think long term. Don't just focus on short-term gains. Prioritize solutions that benefit everyone. Not just one side.
Yep.
This cooperative approach we've been talking about, one based on fairness, sustainability, transparency.
Yeah.
It's not only the most ethical path; it's also the most likely to lead to real peace and prosperity.
That's a great note to end on. Remember, listeners, the future is it's in our hands. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.